All right, hello everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining us today, this edition of the Audio Production Town Hall. My name is Patrice Scanlon. I am a department chair for the Recording Arts program. I'm also a course director. In the Recording Arts program, I teach a course called Project and Portfolio 3, which is not very descriptive. The students record, mix, and also produce a track in a month and then post that on their website. So, you know, just like real life, we get some really great tracks and some, that was interesting. So I'm really, really excited to have Greg Stryke join me today from Dolby. He is artist. What is your title? You introduce yourself. How's that?
Titles. I love titles so much. So first, thank you so much for having me, Patrice. It's awesome to be here. Love Full Sail. It's just amazing. So yeah, my name's Greg Chin. I'm based here in Miami, Florida. I'm at my home studio / office at home. I've been with Dolby for about 3 years. I'm the director of Creative Enablement, specifically for Dolby Atmos. Mostly focused on music, but across anything that's Dolby Atmos. So that could be cinema, podcast, audiobooks, but you know, we're musicians, so
yeah. So you get to interact with a lot of artists too in your role.
Yeah.
So everything from like mainstream big name artists to, you know, people like me, more independent artists, and just kind of spreading the good word that producing and mixing in this immersive format, also known as Dolby Atmos, is a great way to take your music and your production and your art to that place that you have always been wanting it to exist. But, you know, trying to get all those tracks to fit into 2 channels can be a little bit daunting. So it's nice now that we have the bed, right? If you guys are familiar with Dolby Atmos, we have the bed, and then we also have 118 objects. So you can have up to 128 channels. So, and you know, I think most people do 7.1.4. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what those numbers mean, the first number 7 refers to the amount of channels around your head. So left, center, right side, left rear, right rear. The 0.1 stands for LFE, low frequency effect. So that's always coming through your sub. People kind of confuse those 2 things, but that's what that stands for. And then the last number, 0.4, will refer to how many speakers you have in the ceiling. You could do 7.1.2. That's what the bed is designed for. But then you don't kind of get any panning going from front to back on the top. So that's what a lot of people in music are doing, 7.1.4. I think the film guys are doing 9.1.6 generally, right, Greg? You know, so.
Depends, yeah. I mean, 9.1.6 generally for cinema. And by the way, I mean, obviously the renderer, Dolby Atmos started off in cinema, so that's why the bed is 7.1.2. So it kind of aggregates everything. But yeah, really the minimum, you know, speaker base requirement is going to be a 7.1.4 is the requirement.
Sure, okay. So yeah, it's interesting that it started out for cinema, but then, of course, we here in music adapted it. So, you know, there's certain things about Atmos that, you know, kind of is meant for more of the film side of things. Like, you know, for instance, I can't speak for everybody, but I know for myself personally, I wind up not using those bed channels. Most of everything I'm using is object-based, just because there's more flexibility, the way it's encoded. You know, if you're in the bed, you have the pan law you've got to deal with, so there's a little bit of a dip in volume when you go to different speakers, whereas if you're using objects, it's an XYZ location in space, so you get consistent levels as you're moving stuff in the space.
And you know this stuff really well.
Yeah, sometimes. Don't tell anybody. So, as you guys can see, Greg's got a couple of synthesizers and keyboards, and so Greg is a electronic musician himself and DJ. before you got to Dolby, you were with Avid for years, right?
Yeah.
So Greg was responsible for developing a lot of those plugins that we have, software instruments, and ARA, big, that was a big jump for us in Pro Tools, especially with like Melodyne, not having to record that into and then if you made any changes, you'd had to the audio file itself, you'd have to go back and record that in real time. So with ARA, it's using random access memory to load that file in so you can do everything in real time, and there's no latency, and that has just been a godsend. I only use Melodyne in ARA, to be honest, but I know there's a lot of plugins you can use there. And then before, or maybe while you were at Avid, you were a Roland featured artist, right? And so maybe you just want to talk a little bit about your, that side of things, because I think it's interesting for our students to know that all the different kind of possible jobs there are out there.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, it should be about you, Patrice, but yeah, thank you again for having me.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've been at Dolby now for about 3 years. I was at Avid for 18 years, and like the last 5 of those years was really spent as, we had a really big team, or sizable team for Pro Tools development, and we split it between music creation, which I led, and then a lot of the post audio stuff, which a gentleman by the name of Rob D'Amico led. And so yeah, I worked on and created some of the latest plugins that you have in Pro Tools. Anything that ends in cell, Syncell, Groove Cell, Play Cell. Those are all my babies, along with the team. We worked really hard on those.
Yeah.
And then I mean, but first and foremost, I'm a producer and a DJ first and foremost.
Yeah.
So that work, just like you, Patrice, that's what informs my creative side, but it also informs my technical left brain side.
Exactly.
Which is why I work at Dolby and why I worked at Avid. And Roland, if you can't tell, I'm a pretty big Roland fan. I've been a Roland fanboy forever. I have all my original Roland stuff in the back there, my original 808, 303,
wow,
909. They're all back there. And then some of the newer stuff here. And we'll probably die with a 303 in my coffin, like on my chest.
You and me both. I just got the TB 303, the reissue that Behringer makes.
303. Mm-hmm.
So I keep saying I can't play with that until I get all my other work done, and that it's been since Christmas. So let's be real, I'm never going to get all the work done. So I just need to start playing with my new toy, and that's fine. For me, I started off as a dancer. That was my dream. I wanted to be a dancer. But I don't know if you guys have ever seen the show Dance Moms. It was very much like that. Once I moved from New York to Florida, that's when I started like doing the competition circuit, and it kind of made me not love dance anymore. So I'm glad that I can be back loving dance. So once I was 18, I was like, all right, I'm too old to be a dancer. So I've been playing clarinet since I was 8 at that point, and I was pretty damn good at it. But clarinet was just not my passion. I loved music, but clarinet was just not really it. I would still practice like a nerd for like 3 hours a day. So I went to Stetson University, which is in DeLand, Florida, by Daytona, as clarinet major, and quickly said, I'm not going to be a clarinetist. There's no way, So this is mid-'90s, if we need a reference, y'all. So that was pretty much the height of digital audio. So, the height of it becoming accessible for people, right? So I shifted gears and started doing that and first I learned Logic, then Pro Tools. We got into more programming stuff, so I learned C Sound and Max MSP. And so I took my love of dance and electronic music and kind of fused them together doing motion tracking stuff. So wherever the dancer was on stage, what was creating the music, there was a lot of latency, and you never quite was what I wanted it to be. But that got me into grad school in Oakland, California, and I thought that was going to be a 2-year stint. And then 15 years later, I finally moved back to the East Coast back here to Orlando, where my family is, and been here at Full Sail for over a decade. While I was at Stetson, you know, during the week, I was very buttoned up, music conservatory girl. But then on the weekends, I found this little club called Firestone, where acts like Rabbit in the Moon, DJ Icy were fixtures there. Anybody and anybody in the dance music scene was there. So I was kind of straddled between two worlds. This like highfalutin, you know, very kind of hoity-toity classical music scene, and then this underground dance scene. And I've lived there the rest of my life. Like, I've always kind of been straddled between these two poles. So like you, my passion for music, there's the creative side, but I really got into the technical side of it too. And I think part of that is just being a control freak and having to do everything myself, you know. So when I was at Mills College for grad school, that was like the birthplace of avant-garde music. So I spent a lot of time creating music that, you know, had no beginning, middle, or end, no harmony, no melody, no rhythm, and, you know, it was interesting. But I kind of got tired of that scene. But it was a very successful career there, so I can't complain. And I DJ'd when in the 90s with actual vinyl. And then, you know, I was like, no, I have to do serious stuff, and kind of abandoned the whole dance music scene. But then once I moved back here 10 years ago, I started writing dance music, and I was like, oh, this is where I belong, you know. So it's been a kind of a interesting journey, full circle. So that's my background as how I, you know, became clarinetist to technical person and club kid and that.
That's awesome. I'm super curious as to, you know, your journey, you know, obviously with your background and kind of covering all of these different things, which is fantastic. How you got to the point where, because you were already working on music, and, you know, obviously being at Full Sail and being able to experience Atmos and stuff, Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
What was the thing that like clicked with you and really got you to start thinking about, you know,
Atmos?
Writing and doing your stuff in Atmos?
Yeah. Well, you know, in the experimental music scene, we always had multi-channel audio. It wasn't the Dolby spec. Mm-hmm. So you know, working in multi-channel spatial audio was not foreign to me. But, you know, it's very expensive to have an audio interface that can do the many channels and all the speakers, you know, so those were very, like, you know, one-off kind of performances that I did. And then we started, we called it an immersive room, because it didn't quite fit the Dolby specs, you know, if you measured it with, like, where the speakers were and everything. So we called it immersive, but it was a 714 room. It was just very wide. We still have that room, and that's where we all kind of started this journey here at Full Sail into Atmos. And, you know, I was like, cool, yeah, I'm interested. I went to the training. And, you know, of course, he played Rocket Man. And I was like, okay, cool, I get it. That's cool. But then I was like, oh, I see Billie Eilish there, Bury a Friend, play that one. And that song just has so much space. And there was one moment where, like, the sound, like, felt like it came from the back, came up to the front, and like a snake charmer in my face, and then just disappeared. And I was like, oh, I get it. And that was the catalyst for me. And I think, you know, that makes sense. You know, yeah, the Rocket Man is great, but that was something, created in the 60s that was meant for stereo that we transformed to be in Atmos. But this interest now of, like, oh, we have all this space now, they totally changed the way I thought about production, right? Because I think a lot of people make the mistake of speakers placement, and I'm going to make this sound be in this speaker, you know? Yeah. But instead, I think for anybody who's going into this journey, don't think about the speakers. Think about the room you're in and you're in the center of that room, and you have all this space between you and those walls, the ceiling, and the floor. So don't think about, I'm going to put this sound in this speaker up here. It's not the same as working in stereo in that way, right? Where I'm going to pan this 64 to the left or stuff like that. So I think that's a really important thing to embrace, and probably one of the things you need to adapt to, making that switch from stereo to Atmos.
I think you're 100% right. I think one of the things, as creators, we all love seeing, being in a room and seeing speakers and all the gear. It's
Sure.
really, it inspires us. But I mean, for Atmos, yeah, you said it perfectly. The idea, we want you to just be in the space, put yourself in the space. So some of my favorite rooms, you can't see any of the speakers for that specific reason.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So yeah, I was like, that's it. I'm sold. This is where I'm going, and that was a very deep journey. I do probably have ADHD that's undiagnosed, and I'm pretty obsessive compulsive. So that became a really deep rabbit hole I went down very quickly. Spent a lot of time researching before I even started mixing, because I wanted to hear where other people had gone wrong, and I didn't want to make those same mistakes.
When you started, did you go in with the intent? So you were writing and creating an Atmos from the get-go, or did you go back and take any of your previous work and then kind of remix those in Atmos?
So at this point, it's all been past work that was made in stereo. So I would do. I produce in Logic. It's kind of a long workflow, but I produce in Logic for the most time, sometimes in Ableton. And I get a lot of the volume automation and that kind of stuff in while I'm producing, So people are like, it's already mixed. I'm like, no, it's not mixed. There's a difference between production and mixing, And then I always mix in Pro Tools, recording, mixing, editing, Pro Tools, right? And I think for somebody who is a one-woman show for all of this stuff, it's good to actually switch DAWs, because it kind of helps you switch mindsets of, I'm in the creative mode here in Logic, but now we're in Pro Tools, now we're in the engineer part of it. So that has always been my workflow forever. So I did the stereo mix first, and spent way too much time on that. One of the mixes, I was on version 32, and version 12 was the one. So
yeah, that happens. That happens.
Yeah, it's just like I kept going so perfect with it. It like lost its life. Yeah, it was perfect, but it was so perfect. I liken it to when people tuck their shirts in. It's just a little too stuffy and perfect. So like, let it breathe. Let it be a little bit more raw. There's things I'm not happy about that mix version 12. But I like the energy it had. So, I had to just be like, all right, we're good with that. But that's also the great thing. Once I'm done with that, I've done all the hard work. I've done the EQing and the compression and all that stuff. So I just do track bounce now is great in Pro Tools. I love that. So I'll just bounce each track with the effects. And even any kind of aux tracks that have time-based effects, I'll track bounce those out too. And then I'll make a new session for Atmos, started at 5950, just so I can have a little bit of pre-roll there, and then start the song at 1 hour. And I always bring in my stereo mix. And then first thing I do is select the stereo mix and create a selection marker, because when you go to deliver your Atmos mix, the Atmos mix and the stereo mix have to be the exact same length within a half frame. So that kept me honest. So I'll get to that story in a second. But so yeah, it was really. Okay, cool. So once I get into the Atmos side of it, it's not so much about that kind of corrective mixing. What's time consuming is all the different possibilities, right? And
Are you working in primarily objects only? Or
yeah.
you don't use the bed?
Yeah, objects only. And my first few the first few mixes I did, it's funny. What was her name? I forgot her name. That the female instructor from Art House, who was here 2 years ago.
Oh, Natalia?
Yes, Natalia. She said it perfectly. Like when you approach it with like 3 different layers in mind. Like what is going to be static? What's not going to move?
Yep.
And that's for me is like drums and bass, right? And then what is going to have subtle motion, like you can barely notice it's moving. And then what is going to be a little bit more Atmos-y, that you can move around a lot. So I didn't like really make a plan for that, but that's just what I was doing already. But
Organically, that's the
when she said that, like a light bulb went off for me. So I definitely wanted to share that with all of you too, like because it can be daunting, and things. Mixing for like 18, 20 years, it's so fast for me. But when I got into mixing in Atmos, I would be in the room for like 4 hours and I would have like 10 seconds done. And I was getting really frustrated because it was a very slow process. But as a teacher, I'll tell you, it's a good thing because it gives me sympathy for you guys learning new things, So my workflow is a lot faster now. Just because you guys just have to be in it and try the things that you think are a good idea and they're not, and that's okay. Save as versions. That's what I do every time I sit down. I'll go take a break even. I'll come back, save it as a different version, just so I can try different things. And if it totally sucks, I can just go back to the last version. No harm, no foul. So I decided to go with Avid Play, which I think you guys are seeing on your screen. But the reason I went with Avid Play as my distributor was because just like DistroKid and the like, it's $50 a year, and you can release as many stereo mixes as you want. I thought I was going to go with DistroKid for real as my distributor, but the Atmos mixes were $50 a la carte per mix. And I'm making experimental dance music here. So, I think I have like 389 plays in the last year. But that's okay. So listen to my music. Give me one more play, please. 30 seconds each song. Yeah? Okay, thanks. So, I was like, I'm not going to spend that kind of money. That's crazy. Like if you did 10 Atmos mixes, that's $500, So that's what made me decide to go with Avid Play as a distributor, because with Avid Play, you can release as many Atmos mixes as you want, and it's included in that $50 price for the year. It's been good. There's 2 things that really piss me off. A couple of my tracks are super long, like 18, 17, 16 minutes long. And we're talking 48 kilohertz sample rate, 24-bit. I think the most objects I've used is 64. I know there are people who have used all 128 channels, but just think about that. 18 minutes at 48K, 24-bit times 64 channels. That's a huge file. So I was uploading it to Avid Play. And, I had read the instructions. There were even a couple things I found that were wrong in Avid's instructions that I contacted Craig and John Scanlon, who also is the education director at Dolby. And I was like, guys, what is this saying? And they got that corrected, so that was awesome. So I thought I was good. I thought I had read all the instructions. I was like, we're good to go. And I start uploading this, and of course, it's a huge file, so it's going to take like 12, 13 hours, So I went to sleep, woke up the next day, and it said, track rejected. And I was like, what? It said, tracks can't be longer than 10 minutes. And I was like, I hate to say it, but it's so typical Avid. Like, you waited till I did it and then told me I couldn't. And so for those 3 tracks that were over 10 minutes long, I had to split them into 2 tracks, which I was not happy about. And then, like, one was called Transgate was the name of the song. So I did Transgate 1, Transgate 2, and then that got rejected because the name was too generic. Like, they do specifically say, don't name it Audio Track 1, Audio Track 2, but I didn't think, you know, I was just like, come on now. So that was very frustrating and set me back a little bit. So there you go. You guys are welcome. If you're going to distribute through Avid Music, Avid Play, make sure your tracks are less than 10 minutes long.
We did report, by the way, thanks to you, we did report back to DSPs, to Avid as well, that, this is something that should be looked at. We know that there's cloud storage costs and whatever, but, that would be a problem for me. Most of my songs are longer than 10 minutes. Yeah.
And, it is great as an independent artist that, I don't have to be attached to a label to release music, right? Independently, I can distribute my music, but it still felt like, well, you're not that kind of artist, so you can't, do a 10-minute or, I don't know. It just kind of felt like a little like, there still is some gatekeeping going on, but that's my only complaint. I just wish I knew about it before I had uploaded it. That's all. I think that was my biggest complaint. And then my latest, I did an EP with 4 tracks just before the end of the year of 2025. And I'm looking, and for some reason on Apple Music, it was just saying lossless. It wasn't doing the spatial. And I was like, that's weird. Maybe it takes time. But one song was off by 1 frame from the stereo mix, and that's why they would not put the Atmos mix on. And because it was an EP, one of the 4 songs was off by a frame. 1 frame. But because of that, all 4 songs were not distributed in spatial. And I looked like maybe a month later, and voila, everything was released in Atmos. So I had complained to Greg about it, and Greg complained to Apple. So I think they loosened up a little bit on that. Is that right? I know you said you had a meeting with them. So
yeah, we have lots of meetings. Apple's a great partner of ours at Dolby. So yeah, we've got several different meetings for different groups. And yeah, we you as an example, and a few others. They don't, Apple doesn't have to report back to us that they've done X, Y, or Z.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that they've taken a lot of that into consideration.
We'll you can be a frame off. I'm living proof. So far I had such a back catalog of tracks to release that I just wanted to get what I had released. But now I'm going into some, producing new tracks, and I'm approaching it with Atmos in mind from the jump. And also I'm going to go into one of our, in our mix palace, we have 10 7.14 Atmos rooms there. So I'm actually going to start producing in the space with those speakers, which is a luxury. I know, like, not everybody has access to a room that has 7.14 speakers in it. A lot of people are doing headphones and doing, a binaural mix, and that is great too. It's a great place to start.
Yeah, great place to start.
And then go to a space with the 7.14 speaker system to like kind of check and do your final ADM mix, and that's a totally valid way to work too, and a little bit more cost effective.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's don't be afraid of thinking that you have to be in a room. Yeah, we always recommend that finish your mixes in a proper calibrated room. But starting off, I do so much work. I'm traveling so much. I take a pair of headphones, my laptop, my iLock, and I do quite a bit of Atmos work in hotel rooms in headphones binaurally.
Yeah,
great way to work.
Awesome. Well, Greg, I know you got to go. Greg's got to go run a Grammy camp because he's so fancy.
You're fancy. We're all fancy.
We're all fancy. So I hope this kind of excites you guys. I think we should do this again, and we can go a little deeper. Maybe they'll have us back. But don't be afraid of working in Atmos, you guys. It's you can't do anything wrong, right? You're not going to break anything. There's no rules. So just get in there, have fun. You know, get it out of your system. Like when you first work with reverb, you put too much reverb on everything. Just like have things spin around the room, make yourself throw up, and then dial it back.
Exactly. Exactly.
So thank you so much, Greg. Appreciate your time. And
thank you for having me, Patrice. Thank you to everybody.
Yeah, and we'll definitely, if we don't see you before, we'll see you at Hall of Fame week hopefully it'll be in March. I think that's when we're doing it. To be determined.
We'll be there, whenever it is.
All right, so thank you for joining us for this audio production town hall. Join us next month for all the great, inspiring talks that this format can provide all of you. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.